This is the Late Round Podcast with your host, JJ Zacharisa.
What's up, everyone? It's JJ Zacharisa, and this is episode 702 of the Late Round Fantasy Football Podcast, sponsored by FanDuel. Thanks for tuning in. Before getting into the trends this week, I want to remind you about FanDuel Face-Off. FanDuel Face-Off is where you compete in quick, fun games against other real people for real cash. It has all sorts of games that you're familiar with, like Home Run Derby, Wheel of Fortune, puzzle and strategy games, and there's more on the way. Contests are action-packed and last between 2 to 5 minutes, so you can play on your couch, waiting in line, during a commercial break, wherever and on your schedule. Plus, you can practice for free anytime. Whether it be head-to-head, multiplayer, or larger tournaments, FanDuel Face-Off has something for you. Plus, at most contests, you'll be matched against other players of similar skill level, so you're never totally overmatched, even as a beginner. Face-Off is also tied to your FanDuel account and wallet, so you can easily use your daily fantasy funds or sportsbook winnings in the app. Visit FanDuel.com/faceoff or download the FanDuel Face-Off app in the Apple App Store today to get in the game. Age and location restrictions apply, void where prohibited. See FanDuel.com/faceoff-terms for terms and conditions. On the 15 Transaction Show last week, I talked about holding Rondale Moore. He had a down game, but the Cardinals used him in a really stupid way. They used him almost exclusively as a perimeter receiver against the Saints. Then this past week, that thankfully changed. Moore played 52% of his snaps from the slot in Week 8. That was up from 13% the previous week. That resulted in a 7-catch, 92-yard performance. Moore continues to be someone that you want on your roster. He's a good bye-week fill-in. We finally saw DeAndre Swift on the football field again this past week for the first time since Week 3, but his usage wasn't what Swift managers were hoping for. He played just 7 more snaps than Jamal Williams, and he trailed Williams in total touches 13-10. And then Williams saw both goal line attempts from Detroit. My guess is that we're going to see more work from Swift moving forward, that he wasn't actually 100%. The good news is that Swift at least saw a 14% target share, so the receiving role hasn't changed. Now, I tend to talk about team pass-to-rush touchdown ratio on this show, specifically this episode. And I want to do that again this week. At this time, the Browns have the most lopsided pass-to-rush touchdown ratio in the NFL. They've rushed for 15 of their 22 touchdowns. They've done that with a pass attempt rate of about 49%, meaning 49% of their pass and rush attempts have been passes. Based on that number, we would expect their pass-to-rush touchdown ratio to be a lot higher, meaning they should have more passing touchdowns than they do right now. I'm sure we're bound to see that start to flip once Deshaun Watson takes over. Gabe Davis is a boom-or-bust fantasy asset. We know this. So far this season, he's given us 3 games of 16-plus PPR points, and he's given us 3 games where he failed to reach 7 points. Quite literally the definition of boom-or-bust. He had a down game in Week 8 against the Packers. But the thing is, when he's had those down games in the past this season, it's come with a low target share. His other 2 bad games saw target shares of 10.5% and 9%. This past week, it was 28%. That was actually by far his highest target share of the season. So hold tight with Davis. Better performances are ahead. Brian Robinson has played 4 games this year. Let's throw that first game out the window because he was returning from that injury. That means we've got a 3-game sample size of him being a real part of this offense. Back in Week 6, he led the Commanders' backfield with a snap share of 47%. It was the same story in Week 7 with the exact same snap share. In Week 8, though, his snap share dropped. It was 25%. Antonio Gibson was playing a similar number of snaps. J.D. McKissick was the one who saw a bump. I still think that Gibson is the best running back in this backfield, and analytics back that up. On the season, according to NumberFire's expected points model, Gibson has a 42% success rate on the ground. Brian Robinson's at 35%. This backfield is still a mess overall for fantasy purposes, though. I've gotten this question a lot over the last couple of weeks, and the answer to A.J. Dillon is yes. He's just a higher-end handcuff at this point that can be used in deeper leagues as a flex play if you're in a pinch. That's the answer. Dillon hasn't scored double-digit PPR points since Week 1. He's seen just 1 target over his last 2. And he's seen just 1/3 of his team's running back rushes. Until those backfield share numbers change, he can't be trusted. I think it would have been easy for me to call Kyle Pitts a sell candidate on this week's 15 Transactions episode. But his route participation over the Falcons' last 2 games, it's been better. It's gotten close to 90%. During the first 6 weeks of the season, it was just under 70%. And it's no surprise that Pitts has seen target shares of 42% and 32% over his last 2 games. The Falcons are doing everything in their power to not have to throw the ball a lot. But this is at least some good news. Finally, some good news for Kyle Pitts. Rhamondre Stevenson is having an awesome year. He finishes a top 15 running back in PPR formats in each of his last 4, and since week 2 ended, he's averaged over 20 PPR points per game. Obviously, Damian Harris was out for a chunk of that. 2 weeks ago when Harris returned, the Patriots were in a negative game script, and Stevenson, he's the team's pass catcher. So he saw a lot of work there. He had a 29% target share and he caught 8 passes. That continued into week 8. Stevenson saw a 25% target share this past week. He had another 7 catches for 72 yards. The one thing that I think is kind of interesting here is that in week 7, Stevenson had 22 routes run, Harris had 5. That's according to PFF. In week 8, Stevenson had 23 and Harris had 17. Again, some of that had to do with game script and Stevenson being the pass catcher there. But I don't love the fact that Harris was still running a good number of routes this past week. I don't think this is anything more than something to just understand and have in your head. You don't need to trade away Rhamondre Stevenson. Stevenson, according to 4for4 Stat Explorer, he still played 83% of New England's third down snaps this past week. He's going to be a nice play each week. This is a great role. I just want to monitor and see if this shifts the target share numbers at all in more neutral game scripts moving forward. Joe Mixon continues to get by in PPR formats through receiving. He only has 2 rushing touchdowns this year, but he scored 11 or more PPR points in all but 1 game. And it's because his target share per game rate is almost 15%. He's never been higher than 12.5% across his career. If the Bengals can get their run game going, which I know we've said that all year, but if they can do that, Mixon can really see that full mid-range RB1 potential. He's just not there because of the lack of effectiveness on the ground. That doesn't mean that he's not playing a really valuable role, though. The list of wide receivers with a 25% target share per game or higher, it's pretty unsurprising. Chris Olave's on there. Maybe you didn't realize that he was seeing that high of a target share, but you probably were. DJ Moore's on there, Drake London, Deontay Johnson, Darnell Mooney. Those are players who are kind of underperforming, and they're still on this list. But one player who you may be surprised by is Jakobi Meyers. Meyers is getting it done this year. He has a 25% target share per game for New England. He's coming off a game where that target share was almost 38%. He's now scored double-digit PPR points in every single game played this year. Here's a list of players who have also done that at wide receiver. Cooper Kupp, Jamar Chase, Stephon Diggs, Hollywood Brown, DeAndre Hopkins, who's only played 2 games, and Jakobi Meyers. If you need a high floor option, he is absolutely the easiest way to achieve that goal. That's it for today's show, though. Thanks to all of you for listening. If you've yet subscribed to the Late Round Fantasy Football Podcast, make sure you are by searching for it pretty much anywhere podcasts can be found. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter @LateRoundQB. Remember to check out LateRound.com, join the Patreon, subscribe to the newsletter. I can't tell you guys enough how awesome the Late Round Fantasy Football Discord is. That community's been amazing, so definitely check it out, LateRound.com. Otherwise, thanks for listening, everyone. I will talk to you tomorrow with the Weekly Sleeper Show.